Around the year 1920, the British Empire set an almighty record as the largest country/empire in history. The empire controlled some 35.5 million kilometers squared of land, around a quarter of all land on Earth, alongside some 412 million people, which at the time was again about a quarter of all humans on the planet. Now, of course, we all know about the British Empire's history, not so great in terms of ethics and peace, but it was once the most powerful empire on the planet. Today, the UK is a shadow of its former power. Although, saying that, the country still ranks 6th in the world for GDP, 2nd in the world for soft power, 21st in the world for population, and still owns many important overseas territories. Meaning this relatively small country still does have a global impact. The same can't be said for Mongolia, however, who at its peak had the second largest empire of all time in terms of land control, at some 24 million kilometers squared. Although there is no universally agreed figure, some sources suggest that at the height of its power, the empire controlled around 100 million people. Again, similar to the British Empire's peak of controlling some 25% of the world's population. Skip forward to modern day times and Mongolia is far from recognisable from this once global superpower. The country ranks 131st in the world for population and 119th for GDP. Although the country is still rather large, it has very little regional, never mind global influence. In the 16th and 17th centuries, Spain was a dominant global superpower, with vast territories across the Americas, Asia and Europe. The Spanish Armada was one of the most formidable naval forces of its time, enabling Spain to explore and colonize distant lands. This powerful naval presence is why Spanish is still spoken throughout Latin America and various other parts around the world today. At its height, Spain's empire controlled about 13 million kilometers squared of land, which would make it the second largest country on Earth by today's standards. Today, Spain remains an important country within Europe. However, with the 15th highest GDP and the 30th largest population globally, its status as a global superpower has significantly diminished. Modern-day Spain faces a demographic challenge, including an aging population, which could further impact its influence in the future. Now, Portugal follows a similar story to that of Spain, who in the 15th and 16th centuries was also a maritime powerhouse. It established a vast empire across Africa, Asia and South America. Most notably Brazil, which is by far the largest Portuguese-speaking country on Earth, with some 72% of all Portuguese speakers living in this one country alone. Today, Portugal only has 2 overseas territories, being the archipelagos of Madeira and Azores in the Atlantic Ocean. Portugal itself is a tiny country found in West Europe with a relatively low population at just 10.6 million. Just like Spain, Portugal sees a very high quality of life. People live to be very old and their fertility rate is rather low, meaning their population also seems to have peaked and will only decrease from now on. Now, believe it or not, around 100 years ago, Argentina was considered to be one of the wealthiest and most prosperous countries on the planet. During this period, Argentina benefited from large-scale European immigration, significant foreign investment, and booming agricultural exports, particularly beef and wheat. Buenos Aires grew into a cosmopolitan city, often compared to major European capitals, hence why it got the name Paris of Latin America. At this time, Argentina had one of the highest GDP per capita rates in the world. Similar to, or even higher than many European countries, life was looking good for the country. But then in the 1930s, the Great Depression and political instability saw the country falling into decline. Today, the country is still in economic turmoil. The country ranks 70th in the world for GDP per capita, and has seen insane hyperinflation in recent times, leading to its people preferring the US dollar to its own currency. In the 1940s, Japan's empire had reached its peak, stretching across East Asia and the Pacific. This included places like Korea, Taiwan, parts of China, and various Pacific islands. Then, although Japan suffered a catastrophic loss in World War II, it did see an unbelievable economic boom for the rest of the 20th century. Japan transformed from a war-torn country into one of the world's largest economies. By 1980, Japan had the second largest economy on Earth. It was a miraculous recovery since the mid-1940s. Its population also ranked them 7th in the world. However, the bubble that was projecting Japan to reach even greater heights eventually popped in the early 90s, leading to severe economic downturn. Their economy stagnated deeply, hence why this decade was known as Japan's lost decade. Japan did then see some nice growth in the noughties, seeing its economy peak in 2012 at $6.2 trillion US. However, by then, China's meteoric rise had already begun, leapfrogging the Japanese. Skip forward to current times and Japan's GDP has dropped to 4.1 trillion, falling behind Germany and inevitably, very soon, India. The yen is also in a state of emergency. It is currently at a 38-year low against the dollar. Japan's population is also notoriously aging. The country sees one of the highest life expectancies on Earth alongside one of the lowest fertility rates. By 2050, its population is projected to fall by around 20 million, and at current projections by 50 million by the turn of the century. In the mid-20th century, the Soviet Union was at its peak. It spanned across much of Eurasia, extending across 11 time zones and sharing land borders with some 12 countries. The Union controlled some 22 million kilometers squared of land and reached a peak population of some 293 million. During this time, the Union also acquired an estimated 40,000 nuclear warheads. They were a force not to be reckoned with, and easily competed with the US as the global superpower. But then in 1991, it collapsed and the Union dissolved. Although Russia is still a formidable force today and by far the largest country on Earth, it doesn't have the same status as what the peak Soviet Union did. Around 2,500 years ago, ancient Greece was a major superpower due to its advanced city-states like Athens and Sparta. It had impressive achievements in philosophy, science, the arts, and a strong military force. Their culture and influence spread widely across the Mediterranean, and they laid the foundations for Western civilization. However, internal conflict severely weakened their power over time. Greece was also conquered by larger empires such as Alexander the Great's Macedonian Empire and then the Roman Empire. These conquests, alongside the rise of other powerful civilizations, led to Greece losing its status as a superpower. Today, Greece is a shadow of its former powerful self. Its cuisine, culture, and history is still widely appreciated, but it simply does not have the might that it once did. The country has a population of just 10.4 million, and like many other countries mentioned so far, especially those in the Med, it has an aging population problem, as well as a fertility rate not high enough to maintain its population. It doesn't help that Greece saw one of the worst economic crises in the 21st century in the 2010s, needing to be bailed out by the EU, which further led to economic worries over the next decade or so. Skip forward some 16 years later and it still isn't even close to recovering to those once highs. So this video could go on forever. There are so many countries and empires that have fallen over the last couple of millennia. If you can think of any others, please do tell us about them in the comments below. Like and subscribe for part 2, and as always, thank you very much for watching.